Hello and welcome to this tutorial. I'm KR, and in this we are going to create the textured painting as shown in the photograph. I'm starting on a gallery wrapped canvas. It's about a 1.5 inch side. The size that I'm working on is a 20 by 20 canvas. This is already prepped with a coat of titanium white paint. I always prep my canvas with either gesso or titanium white or both. To give it a very nice sort of smooth finish to start on. So what I'm going to start with is my extra heavy gel molding paste that is listed in the materials used. And of course, it's hard to open this jar. All right, I'm going to start with it straight out of the jar with a palette knife. And this is a very sort of creamy textured heavy gel, just what it says. I'm going to start and lay this down working. This is the top of my canvas. This is the bottom near me. I'm going to start with a cascade sort of pattern, starting here and working from my edges, just laying it down flat and smoothing it out, bringing it down in a cascade pattern. If you've seen my tutorials, you've seen me do this before. Taking some more on straight from the jar. You can put this on a palette if you like and work with it. I'm using it straight from the jar. I'm going to be creating sort of a pattern from the sides in. So I'm working on both sides, just laying down that gel with a flat palette knife. And I'm manipulating it until I like the texture. Be very careful when working with your texture paste. Don't let it dry until you're very happy with it, because what you start off with is what you're going to get when it dries. You can turn it vertically like this to get a little different look. You can move it sideways. You can scrape it off and reapply in a different area. So the thing about working with this is you do have a little bit of working time. It doesn't dry quite as quickly as the other acrylic mediums such as a glaze or the acrylic paints or anything like that. So you have a little bit of working time, but you really need to work expediently. You don't have hours and hours. It's not oil. But you do have time to get it to the point where you're happy with it. And as you can see in the light, you may not be able to see, but you will be able to see quite well when we start putting the paint color on. And when you're working on your own canvas, you'll be able to see quite well where you're putting your texture. I'm just going to put a little bit in the center area here because I don't want a lot right there. Dragging it down. Putting on my texture, I'm pretty happy with it, making sure there's really none around the sides because that will dry kind of globby on the sides and you want a nice smooth side when you're done. The texture has been laid. I'm pretty happy with it. It's cascading down here, and the next layer we're going to start building up the color using some of our glazes and acrylics. All right, hello and welcome back. We are dry. Our texture has fully dried, and we're going to go ahead and start adding some pretty layers of color. Now on my palette, What I'm going to do with this is I have some teal. You can use a cobalt teal, whatever colors you like. I also have some phthalo blue, and I have a pretty fluid phthalo turquoise that I'm going to use. So adding a little of that high flow. You can use any type of paint you want for this, but I'm using a high flow phthalo turquoise. I'm using a... Alright, so I have a little of the high flow phthalo turquoise on my palette. I'm going to be adding some phthalo blue, which is a blue-green color. And I'm going to be adding some of my teal. So these are the three colors that I'm using as my base, and I'm going to add and subtract as we go along. I'm going to put a little water in my palette. See how that high flow definitely moves quickly. I'm also going to add a little of my glaze. This is a satin glazing, acrylic glazing. A little water on my brush, and I'm just going to mix this up so I get a really pretty base color. Bringing in a little bit of my lighter color here. I'm not mixing the entire thing because I want to come back and use a little bit of this in a moment. So I'm sort of mixing on one side. Now working on my canvas, I'm going to give it a very light mist with my mister bottle and work to lay this down, starting from the top of the canvas. I'm working down to the bottom, which is by me. Now, as you can see, I'm not getting a full 100% layer, and that's perfectly fine. The more that I get a little broken up layers, the more interesting it is versus just being 100% flat blue on the bottom. And that is why I work with glazes, because it gives you that pretty translucency. It does require a little more patience. It requires a little more time to create the artwork versus just laying down a layer of blue. But you get a very pretty translucency of layers built up. So I'm smoothing this out. It's a very light coat. I'm moving back and forth just to vary the brush stroke a little. Back and forth, just to smooth this out as much as possible. Alright, so that's where I'm at right there. I've got lots of white bits showing through, and that's where I'm going to pick up a little bit more of my cobalt teal or my teal or lighter color and move that in to a little more of a green color. Again, you can work with any colors you like. This is what I've chosen for this painting. I just want to bring a little variation of color in by doing that. And I'm working quickly before the acrylics dry. Smoothing it out kind of like I did the first layer. I'm going to mix a little more of that blue in with that and lay that down in a couple of my areas. So I have a little more depth, a little lightness. The entire base of my painting. I do have a few whiter areas that didn't catch as much paint, but that's okay because we are going to put another layer on. But generally I've got the base of my painting done here. I finished in the same direction of my painting. Since this is basically a vertical painting, I'm finishing with a vertical stroke. I'm going to let this dry really well, another day or two, and we're going to put another layer of glaze on top of this, and then we'll be working with the surface, or working with the surface texture. And when I finish, I like to go around and make sure that I've gotten any drips off the sides of my painting, so we can finish those off in the end and there's no globs of paint or anything. So go ahead and let that dry really well, and then we will come back and do yet another layer. Hello, we are back and this has fully dried. So what I'm going to do is mix up one more layer of glaze. And I'm going to use my phthalo, just a little of that. I'm also going to use a little bit of gold. And I'm going to use my satin glaze that I've been using. This is again another very thin layer. So we want more glaze than paint. I would say oh boy, maybe about 1/4 teaspoon to 1/8 of a teaspoon each of those. And then maybe a good tablespoon of the glaze. A few spritzes of water. And I'm going to mix that up. I do want it to be a little bit iridescent. So we've got a nice thin layer there. My canvas back here. I am going to give it just a couple spritzes of water. Now the only reason I'm doing this is I know it's very dry. It's 48 hours. So I know I'll be okay. If it was any less than that, I would not be spritzing it. I would be wiping it with a brush with a little water. Now as you can see, I mix that with my brush. And when you mix with your brush and not a spoon or a palette knife, there are the tendencies of your brush to hold paint in certain areas and you will get that streak. I don't mind that for this painting, so I'm okay with that because I'm going to go ahead and blend that. And I like to have that little color variation. If you really wanted a full-on 100% flat color and you did not want it to have any streaks whatsoever, you would absolutely not mix with your brush that you're going to use. You would want to mix with another utensil and then use your brush, and make sure it's very well mixed before you introduce it to your canvas. But for my purposes today, I like that, and I hoped that I'd actually get a few of those streaks because it gives me that pretty color variation. So I'm applying this, back and forth, just kind of blending that all in, giving myself one more thin layer of color. And then what we're going to do, I think we'll be at a good point. We'll be able to let this dry thoroughly, and wipe my sides quickly while I talk. Let this dry thoroughly, and then we can come back, assess, and see if we're ready for our top layer. This has fully dried 24 hours, so we're going to put another coat of glaze, and all I've done is mix up some of my phthalo blue, a little of my satin glaze, and a little water, just enough for a layer of paint on this. So you can use your own judgment on how much you want to use, but definitely just a little blue, some glaze, and I'm using a flat brush. I added a little bit of water. I've got a really nice thin coat of paint here, and I'm going to just apply this in some areas on this painting. I just want a little more blue to come through. Perhaps some areas that have a little more white that didn't get covered with the last coat of paint, just to break up some of that background color. And if you work quickly, you can blend this fairly easily once you have it down, if you make a thin layer like this. Okay, so got some good blue down here. And I'm going to blend this now. I'm going to just use one of my dry utility brushes. This is dry, no water on it. And I'm going to work where I first laid the paint down and quickly just blend back and forth, up and down. I don't want to cover the entire canvas. That's my choice. I just want to get into the areas that didn't have quite as much blue as I wanted, and cover those areas of white that might have gotten left from the last coat. So we're just quickly sort of scrumming this using our brush on its side, moving the paint up and down. You can move it back and forth very lightly and get the blend that looks good to you. If you find you've laid a little too much paint down and you really don't like that, you can go back and either put another coat of the original color down, or you can take a damp paper towel, just a very little water on it, just a small bit, a little bit of water on your paper towel, and you can go through and perhaps just dab up a little bit of the color in a couple spots where it might have gotten a little more concentrated than what you wanted. And if you work quickly and very lightly with just very little water, you can bring the paint up. Don't wait for it to dry though, because this won't work. So you can do that a few times till you decide, oh, you know, maybe I took too much up here, so I want to lay a little more down here where it was before, and do your original technique. Use your dry brush again and blend it, and so on. Now we are going to let this dry very well again. Glazes have to dry very well to be able to work on them. And then we're going to come back and do some finishing. Maybe another layer. I have to assess and see. I think we're going to have one more layer, and then we're going to be putting on our metallics. So let this dry really well, at least 24 hours, and then we'll come back and work on it again. This has fully dried, and you could see from the close-ups there's a pretty striation of color that we have here. We have our blues, we have a tiny bit of the metallic gold from our last glaze coming through, but not too much, just a little bit of shimmer. We have that teal, that turquoise color. So now what we're going to do is we're going to apply our final coats. There will be more than one, but a couple coats of our metallics onto this. So what we're going to do is when we're doing that, we're mixing up our blend first. In our palette, we're going to use a dry flat brush. I'm taking a little bit of gold paint, just a metallic gold, any color you like, or any brand you like. I'm going to add a little bit of an iridescent bronze and just a little glaze. Now I'm using a gloss. You could use the satin. I just want a very little bit of that. All right, I'm going to mix that up with a spritz of water, not much water, dry brush. I'm mixing that up. Just to have that much on my brush. All right, we're going to use the flat brush on the texture. So, starting with the paint, and I want to remove a little bit of it, so I'm going to wipe it on one side of my palette just to make sure I have a little bit of paint, just to start. I don't want too much on my brush. Okay. I'm going to start at the top and lay my brush absolutely flat and drag it down. Now, doing this and doing it slowly without a lot of water, a lot of medium, anything, is going to pick up paint on the texture. Starting back up at the top and just very slowly dragging it. Now, I'm going to do that along here, starting at the top, bringing it down. If you've watched my tutorials, you've probably seen me do something like this, since I do work with textures quite a lot. You can start and you can apply it all the way across. You can do a cascade pattern. I would suggest apply a little, which is why I wiped my brush off. You can always come back and apply more. I want to caution you that metallics dry quicker than other regular acrylics. So if there's something you don't like, immediately take a sponge or a wet piece of paper towel, just a little water on your paper towel, soften your edges and do your removal before you move on. Don't do the entire painting and then come back and expect to be able to remove a lot of it, because metallics do tend to dry. So if there's anything you want to soften, do that as you're working along. Okay, so I'm going to pick up just a little more from the side of my palette, just want a little bit, working on the other side, laying this down flat. Do not approach this as you're painting. You're laying your brush flat and you're dragging it. And you're picking up just the bits of texture that are protruding from your canvas. And that gives such a pretty, nice, shimmery glow. I always think a little bit of metallic is better than a lot of metallic. That's my personal opinion. Some people don't agree. They like a lot of metallic. I think the shimmer and glow that you get from a metallic in a painting or an iridescence as it catches the light is just unparalleled. Really, it's quite lovely. And as the light changes in your room, as it becomes sunset, lights come on and the sun hits it a different way, it changes color. So this painting might look quite bright blue in the morning or green, and then as the day goes on it will change a little bit of color and pick up those hints of metallic as well. So this is sort of a back and forth painting where I'm just going back and forth with little spots, picking up a little more metallic where I'd like a little more, making sure that I'm not dropping down too much. So this takes a few minutes to kind of lay down properly, but once you have it done, you can stand back and know when you've pretty much gotten what you wanted. Now you can lay your brush sideways and bring it down that way as well. That's going to give you just a little bit different look. Pressing it into the canvas a little bit, you can hear that. It's dropping down just a little bit more paint off of that without dropping a ton of paint. I'm going to put a little more on the side here. Back here, making sure I have a good visual balance on my canvas. Picking up a little, moving along. And I'm picking up just like this. I'm just pressing one side, not dipping or back and forth. I'm just pressing right on there, one side, picking that up and applying it. And I want that sort of cascade drip kind of look. So I don't want any hard edges down here. Any hard edges, I keep my damp paper towel and I wipe those. And I'm going to lay just a little right here just to bring that down. And I think we're going to be about done with this layer. So the next layer is going to be putting a final glaze onto this painting, and I'm softening this little bit of gold right there. There's quite a heavy bit right here that I actually kind of like, so I'm going to leave that. Sometimes it just takes standing back, looking, and deciding if that's what you want to live with in your painting. Okay, so I've made sure I've started at the very top here and just brought my brush down in a variety of ways, this way, but always flat and always with just a little paint on one side. You can always apply more. All right, so I think we're at a good space here, and I'm gonna let this dry thoroughly. We're gonna come back and put a very pretty glaze on top. Okay, we are back, and what I'm going to do is mix up some black and some bronze to finish off our nice gallery wrap sides that we have on this painting. So in a palette where I had some bronze paint that I was using, it's dried, I'm going to mix some black. This is just a plain Mars black. I'm also going to add a little bronze. Now you don't have to do this. You can finish with one color. You could put a white on the side. You can use just a complete flat black. Putting a little water on my flat brush and mixing this up. I'm doing this because there is a little shimmer in the painting, and I find that mixing a little bit of a custom color just adds to the dimension of the art. So it's ready to hang as is and doesn't need to be framed. It's not adding a whole lot, it's just adding a little bit of dimension to the black. So when working with our sides, you don't want a lot of paint, so I'm wiping some of this paint off that I have from my brush and starting with a fairly, it's saturated, but it's a little smaller amount, to be very careful and to work. You can work either by starting at the bottom of your canvas and coming straight up. If you do that, be very careful because you can get splashes on your canvas of the color. Since you're bringing your brush up, it can splash like that. I generally like to start by starting at the top and moving down like this. That way I get a nice clean edge. It does require a little, you know, bit of a steady hand to get it right there at the crease of the canvas from the top down. But if you go around and you do that, you can really save yourself any splashes on the cover on the front of your canvas. And then if you have any problems, all you have to do is take a piece of paper towel like this and then just go around the edge like that, and you'll create a very nice, pretty, crisp edge where the canvas and the paint meet. So I'm going to do that on my entire canvas, and then I'm going to let this dry and apply a coat of archival glaze, or archival varnish. And you can see how to do that in my technique session, which is free, and it's very easy. I use a spray varnish to set this painting for an archival quality. And then I will post some images of the final painting. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me on this tutorial. I hope that you have a beautiful artwork to show for all your hard work. And I hope you learned something and really enjoyed it. Please check out my other tutorials, and thanks again.